I was recently involved in a sale of a property, some vacant land out in Brights Grove, and they are looking at developing it. And I got thinking the other night what a fascinating process it is to turn a side yard of a property into a development project.
We're just out here at City Hall right now. We've dropped off some paperwork for the next step of the process, but why don't we go have a seat and we'll talk through the entire process from start to finish.
So David, tell me, how does one take a side yard of any property and turn it into 7 building lots?
Well, that's a good question. So typically the first thing you need is a severance. So to do a severance, basically what you're doing is you're taking a property and you're separating off another section of that property.
So we're in Sarnia, we're right across from City Hall. Does this differ from municipality to municipality?
It does differ slightly. So every municipality will have different requirements for what studies might need done and what the entire process looks like. But overall, it's quite similar. Typically what you need to do is talk to the city, ask them about their process, and they'll give you a list of required studies and the paperwork that you need to fill out. You go ahead and get that started, and then all of the paperwork gets submitted to the city for their approval.
You've developed in different municipalities. Do you have a favorite?
I don't have a favorite. Everyone is just a little bit different. Sometimes you're dealing with the municipality itself. Sometimes you're dealing with the county overall. Typically that depends on the size of the municipality. So the larger municipalities will do it themselves. Smaller municipalities often outsource that to the county.
Okay. So you talk about studies. Do you do the studies? Do I do the studies? Like, what studies are you talking about?
So typically the studies are done by whoever it is that is applying for the severance. Oftentimes that is a seller, but in some cases it's the buyer. And so the buyer will apply for them basically on the seller's behalf, and so they're required to get the studies done.
So what kind of studies are there that would be done?
So there's a few that are very common on almost every development, and there's some that are case-by-case specific. So very common ones are traffic impact studies, noise studies, archaeological studies, sometimes environmental studies like phase 1 environmental, and in different cases even a full environmental impact study needs to be done. But the municipality will tell you what studies exactly need done, and so then it's on you to get those started and get those done.
So I've got a piece of land. Can I just move my house on? Or is there, like, how do I get my water? How do I get my...
So that is the next step called servicing. So after if you get a severance approval, then typically if you're going for more than one building lot, you would need a plan of subdivision to be put on, and that's a different step. So they're requiring individual engineered drawings as to where the services are going to go. But so what basically services are where's your water line, your storm and sanitary sewers, your hydro and your gas lines going in, where do they connect to the current ones, and you bring all of that to the city as to where they're going to go, and then they'll give you approval to go ahead and start putting those in.
So, but you've just spoken now about plan of subdivision. I just worked through a severance.
Right. So the difference is when you sever a property, what you're doing is basically making one new parcel of land. So if you had, let's say, 1 acre and you wanted to cut it in half, that would require a severance. If you want to take that 1 acre, that half an acre, and make it into multiple building lots, typically what you need is a plan of subdivision that's registered on the property. There's some more paperwork that's required after the severance in order to do that, and then at the end you end up with 3 separate lots or 7 lots, depending on how big of a parcel you're talking about and how big the requirements are in the zoning.
So, for example, I've got a dump and I want to put some houses on it. It's zoned as a dump. Can I keep it as a dump and just build some houses on it?
No, you can't do that. So before you go ahead and if you're purchasing land for development or you're thinking about developing your own land, the first step is to go and check the zoning. Now, you can do zoning changes, and there's a whole process behind that as well. But typically it's easier if you're already zoned for the future use that you want. If you're not, you'll have to go through typically prior to severance, and ask them for a zoning change on that portion of the property. So That's a very important aspect, and in some cases they will deny zoning requests based on things like proximity to a dump, proximity to floodplains, all that kind of stuff, and so the city is the best resource to talk to about the zoning.
Is zoning simply a city issue, or would it be a county or a provincial?
So there are kind of three different levels in our province of how things work. So you have the city or municipality. So now in Sarnia, they do everything for the city and county typically together. But with some of the smaller municipalities, they'll have a town official plan, a county official plan, and there's something called the provincial policy statement. All three of them need to be adhered to.
Okay.
So just because your zoning says one thing, the official plan could say something different, and then you might need an official plan amendment to change that.
So you've submitted the paperwork, so it's done. We can start building.
Not yet. So right now we have the severance completed. We don't have the plan of subdivision approved yet. It has been submitted. So that will go through the city's engineers to verify that the servicing, the stormwater sewers, the sanitary sewers, water lines are all large enough to support the development. So they'll go through all of that paperwork. And then once they have approval, then you can start on servicing. Once your services are all in, then you can start building some houses.
In 3 weeks?
Not in 3 weeks, unfortunately. The entire process of doing a severance from start to finish, on an ideal world, if you're doing it very quickly, probably at least 6 months. If you're doing a bigger project or there's more complexity, it can be longer. I would budget for at least 1 year.
So if I take a chunk of land that could be 9 lots, can I just put 9 lots on there? Or I see parks all over the place, and I see these playgrounds and everything. I don't have to do any of that, do I?
You do have to do that. So the short answer with, can I just start putting lots up? No. If you were listening before, you would have heard me say you have to go through the entire process of plan of subdivision and or severance. But part of that is that land needs to be used for parkland, and so that comes from somewhere. That comes from the developer. And so there are parkland requirements on every subdivision, and depending on the subdivision, the town or city may want cash in lieu of parkland as well.
Just so they don't have a whole bunch of little parks around.
That's right. So if you're doing a small subdivision, like let's say 7 lots is a good example, the requirement of the percentage is so small that you'd end up with a really small parkette, and it wouldn't really be used by people. So instead of doing that, what they do is they ask you for the cash instead of the parkland, and they will take that and put it into a big pool, and when they have a bunch of small developments together, then they can build a big park right in the middle, or wherever the city deems it as most appropriate for use.
So we've already established here that basically we've gotten a severance, and we're looking at doing a plan of subdivision, and this may take anywhere from 2 or 3 months all the way up to a year. So what would the next steps be like? When can I start servicing, or what's the next steps at City Hall here?
Right. So at City Hall, if you've submitted all of your documentation for your plan of subdivision application and paid the required fee, then eventually the city will come back with either an approval or a rejection. But a lot of the times, if you've gotten to this far, things are going to be approved. So when you get that approval, then you will hire out a company typically. Some people do it themselves. They get people who are familiar with this and do excavating and that kind of thing. And they'll put in all the services, all the storm sewers, sanitary sewers, water lines, all of that stuff. All of that gets put in first, and then you can start digging basements.
So next time we're going to be talking about, we're actually going to go to a spot that's being developed, and we'll talk from there. But next time we're going to talk about the actual servicing, we're going to be talking about the excavating, we're going to be talking about things like that. Coldwell Banker is involved in numerous projects around the county, from Petrolia to Courtright, to Sarnia, to Brights Grove, even in Forest. And so if you are looking at being a developer, if you're looking at buying a new home, or if you're looking at doing anything, feel free to give David or myself a call, or anyone at Coldwell Banker.
Yeah, definitely. We're always happy to help and answer questions. This can seem kind of like a daunting task, But once you break it down, and you know some people who, I have lots of connections who do this all the time for a living, they can make the process a lot more simple and easy to understand. So I'm always happy to share my information with you. Feel free to give us a call.